And joining us now from Indianapolis is Matt Norlander, our college basketball senior writer. So Houston goes to their first Final Four since they did it 3 straight times from 82 to 84. Now, Phi Slamma Jamma, they are not. But how good is this team, and what do we learn about them in the second half when they gave up that 17-point lead to tie it up?
I got to be honest, we didn't learn a ton because Houston wins like this. It's willing to, again, as I said on HQ earlier this week, play and roll around in the mud with just about anyone. Now, it made it a little more difficult than it needed to be, and where my press seat was the end zone side of Houston's bench. So there were a couple times when Houston went into a timeout, and Sampson and those assistants were ripping and tearing into that team, basically telling them, this Beavers team, they've done this like 6 games in a row. Do not think that we are just coasting here. They kept emphasizing rebounding on both ends. Houston, one of the best offensive rebounding teams in America, in fact, second best statistically, was outstanding. Got almost 45% of its misses in this one. The three-pointers were huge. Quentin Grimes had a couple of big ones there. He really stepped up. And then Marcus Sasser having one of his better shooting performances in his recent history in the past couple of weeks. So big-time stuff. Houston rates as the number 3 team at KenPom, by the way. It has been a top 5 team in predictive metrics for a good while here, for more than just a few weeks. So big picture, this is not a surprise to those that have been following college basketball all season long. But if you're just coming around, you've been watching this tournament, and you see that Houston gets there being the first team ever to do it by beating nothing but double-digit seeds, I promise you, this team is for real. You saw how defensively it's for real. You saw on the offensive rebounding side of it how it's for real. You saw how Quentin Grimes, Marcus Sasser, they've got a real killer instinct to them. Credit to Oregon State for coming back the way they did. But for Kelvin Sampson, it's just an incredible run. It was 15 years ago to the day that Kelvin Sampson left Oklahoma to go to Indiana. That flamed out after 2 years with an NCAA investigation, and at the time, a lot of people wondered if he would ever even be able to return to college basketball. He went to the NBA, took a journeyman's route, came back, and has turned Houston into a nationally relevant program and a big-time power. It is a momentous day for that school, that university, and little CBS love here. As I was walking out of the stadium, none other than Jim Nance, an alumnus of Houston, was right there on the concourse level getting video, seeing his alma mater make it back there for the first time since 1984.
Did he say hello, friend, as you walked by?
I didn't want to ruin his moment too much, but he was quite happy. I'll leave it at that.
Look, everyone watched the game and we saw and evaluated it. You were in the stadium there, and you've been there for other Final Fours, and I've been there for Final Fours, and sometimes you can feel 40,000 people surge at once. This is the first time we really had nobody in the stands per se. Did you feel that maybe this affected and helped Houston, that they could steady this run by an underdog with nobody in the building, when normally that roof would have been blown off, because then you would have had 40,000 people screaming for the Beavers? It's harder to steady with nobody there than 40,000 people there. How did that impact how this game was ultimately decided?
To a certain extent, I think it helped Houston start off. I mean, I'll be honest, for the first 60% of this game, the environment in Lucas Oil Stadium was awful. I mean, just cavernous. It was ugly basketball. Houston took an early advantage. Oregon State wasn't good from the foul line. So it was just like, hey, they're playing a basketball game right now. And then once Oregon State was able to make some big-time plays, get some stops, and hit some good shots there, then we finally got a buzz. Like, it felt like an NCAA tournament game. So I actually think Houston was benefited in getting out early and kind of taking the air out of the building and using that to its advantage. But I do think the point you make there is a legitimate one. Had it been a packed house, maybe it goes a little bit of a different way, but I think ultimately Houston has proven to be the better team the entire season. Oregon State made a heck of a run. It went up against a team that's better defensively than it is. And for all the wrinkles that Wayne Tinkle threw in, and we heard on the sound there with Kelvin Sampson that he said that 1-3-1 had a little bit of a unique twist to it. It just wasn't enough. Oregon State isn't well equipped to be able to handle a team that is as physical physical and relentless as Houston is for 40
they didn't
minutes.
Rebound.
So
I thought the difference was Houston rebounding their misses on the offensive end. We knew going in they were good at that, but we thought Oregon State, they play a zone, they're big, they're well coached. Maybe they'd be able to neutralize that, but ultimately they were not. Despite the fact they have the 7-1 kid from Rancho Cucamonga in the middle, really it was Houston's offensive ability to rebound their misses that I thought was the difference here. Were there any other headlines for you as you sort of watch this game other than Houston survives the comeback and was able to do it with nobody, no real crowd on Oregon State, and Houston still able to offensive rebound against a team that was big and playing a zone?
The only other thing I would mention is that Oregon State wasn't nearly as good on the line in this game that it had been leading up to this in the tournament. It was the best foul shooting team, and that wound up, it wound up hurting Oregon State. I don't know if they'd made 5 more foul shots, if it ultimately makes a difference, but it would have been a closer game for a longer period. And from there, potentially they could have had something done. But I just keep going back to how passionate those Houston huddles were in the second half when Oregon State was making its run. There wasn't any sort of disarray. It was just laser focus, and it really speaks to how good of a coach Kelvin Sampson is. You want the big headline. The big headline is, here's a guy who took Oklahoma to the Final Four almost 20 years ago, and he's brought back a storied program. I mean, Houston now is going to its 6th Final Four, and I understand for our younger audience, this has been a program that for the most part hasn't been relevant for the past 30 years, but from the mid-1960s until the mid-1980s under Guy Lewis, Houston was, borderline Gonzaga territory in terms of being that good and not being in a power conference. It is the luster has been returned here for the Cougars, who will await the winner of the next game, Baylor versus Arkansas, on Saturday night.
Matt, a lot of casual fans, casual sports fans, basketball fans, watching basketball perhaps for the first time. They've heard about college sports now, or college basketball at least. Big run and gun, hoisting the three-pointers, get it and go. Houston's kind of the anti that. They slow the ball down. They don't make a lot of threes. Can this style of basketball in this day and age win a national championship, in your opinion?
Yes, it can, and the statistics also bear that out. I want to remind viewers that before the tournament started, Houston's percentage to make the championship game was the best one on that side of the bracket. I'm including Baylor, and part of that is because I think the region Houston was in. But yes, this kind of style is capable of winning a national championship. To be honest, it's not the same kind of style Virginia played, and it's not the same kind of style Texas Tech played when those two teams met in the national championship in the most recent title game in 2019. But a coach as good as Kelvin Sampson, you've got Quentin Grimes, a future pro, just a litany of really tough guards and forwards that aren't going to run from physical play. They will mess around with anyone and are capable of winning a national championship. Obviously not the favorite to do so, but certainly they've got this far. Don't let their road sway you otherwise. If they get, no matter who they get, Baylor, Arkansas, it's going to be a tough game, but Houston's good enough to beat them and face whatever team is on the other side of the bracket.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Look, I know that everybody they beat was a double-digit seed. They beat a 15, a 10, 11, and a 12, but you have to beat good teams to get here. You can't win a church raffle and show up at the Final Four, and they definitely beat a quality team today. Oregon State was rolling, and they showed you the heart of a champion, coming back from down 17 at halftime all the way to tie. So Houston, certainly nothing to apologize for there. You touched on Kelvin Sampson before and how it went badly at Indiana. I mean, he basically left college basketball in disgrace, went to the NBA, and has now kind of come full circle, going back to the Final Four, and in a synergy of sorts in his 1,000th game as coach. Like, for all of us who just see him on the sideline, where he seems, like a pretty regular guy. He's not overly animated. He's not overly quiet. Who is Kelvin Sampson? Introduce him to us as somebody who covers this sport 24/7, 365.
I was texting with someone who knows Kelvin Sampson well near the end of the second half, and we were just kind of texting about what Houston was pacing itself to do and get back to the Final Four. And the term this person used in a loving way was, he is a savage. He has taken this Houston. When he took the Houston job coming out of the NBA, he took it because he was on the Houston Rockets staff. He could work in that city, go home for dinner, recruit. Houston's ripe with plenty of talent, and he still is he puts the same amount of work ethic into the job now that he did when he was at Washington State, more than 30, 35 years ago. And he is an aggressive, tough-minded coach who demands a ton out of his team, but he loves these players with all of his heart. And for this to be his 1,000th game is honestly, frankly, it's amazing. You see him just ripping that net off. He's going to treasure this because when he was booted out of Indiana and they bought out his contract 2 years in, it was a dark day for him, for his college career. And I'm not going to call this a redemptive story or anything like that. There was rule breaking, and Indiana's program was in disarray when he left, but it is certainly quite the scenic route he's taken back to the final stage of college basketball and bringing plenty of shine back to H-Town.
So that's the story of the coach. Let's focus in on the player. As you know, Matt, one player can change the entire complexion of a Final Four. Who's the one man for the Cougars that has to carry the load in the Final Four for them to have any success?
It's Quentin Grimes. He's been the best player on the team the entire season. He's been a top 15 player in college basketball. He'll be on my All-America ballot when I submit it to our editors at CBSSports.com in a day or so here. So he is the guy. He's the guy who hit a couple of big three-point shots. He actually hit one from the corner that Sampson mentioned to Jamie Erdahl in the postgame. He actually had some words to say to Oregon State after he hit that shot. Super competitor, five-star player coming out of high school, went to Kansas, had a flame out his freshman season, transferred to Houston, has bought in, and because of it, bettered his college career, his pro prospects. He's a guy who will go face-to-face with pretty much anyone in college basketball and gives Houston a chance at winning another game or two here in this tournament.
Matt, very well done. Appreciate the time. Matt Norlander, our guy in Indy, joining us all throughout the NCAA Tournament and through the Final Four. So Houston gets it done. And again, look, it's a no. They don't have to apologize for it. I say congratulations. Make it as easy on yourself as you can. I mean, they don't get to pick who they play.
You dance with the girl you brung to the dance, right?
Yeah, but they brought 4 that all had double-digit seeds. Again, they beat a 15, a 10, an 11, and a 12. It cannot happen even for a 1 seed because a 1 seed has to play the 8-9 winner in the second game. They didn't even play anybody who was in the top 9 seeds of any region of the tournament so far. They're now 6-0 in the Elite Eight, and they go back to the Final Four for the first time since '84. Congratulations, Houston.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.